All right, sir. OTAs, I am seeing on my timeline here that has not been a good day for quarterbacks, even though everybody was talking lovingly about Bryce and his development and whatnot. What have we seen so far?
Oh, my gosh. You're kidding me, right?
No,
That's not real, is it?
I don't know
Who said that?
I don't want to call people out, but there might be a beat reporter for a certain paper in town that has not been bullish on what he has seen.
Well, here's the thing. If you get too hung up on one isolated rep in one isolated OTA in the one day a week you get to see, maybe that's true. But I choose to pursue perspective from a little bit wider lens. I mean, maybe when you stand around and watch 28 years, that maybe when you're out here every day watching practice, you realize that one throw going wrong might not be indicative of the greater product. Here's what I can tell you. Bryce Young looks like a guy who does the things that Bryce Young did at Alabama. He appears to be decisive. He appears to be smart. He appears to be able to get the ball out quickly. He appears to make the right reads. And I think when you do all those things, it doesn't necessarily make for big highlights. I mean, he's probably not a guy. There was a deep ball in practice today down the sideline to DJ Chark, who this just in is fast and big. And everybody went ooh and ah, and TV got some good video for the 6 o'clock news. But I think for the most part with Bryce, it's been about making the right decision. It's been about, learning everything. He's going to be just fine.
I agree with you.
Here's the other thing that tickled me today. There was a lot of breathless commentary about Bryce is taking the reps with the first team today. Is this a change in the depth chart? Hey, this just in. You want to call this breaking news from Panthers.com, Darin Gantt?
Yes.
Bryce Young probably going to start a bunch of football games this year, gang.
Maybe the first one.
Yeah, probably that first one. The shocking part is not that he's working with the first team in June. The shocking part will be if he's not with the first team in Atlanta on September 10th. So, I guess this is the kind of stuff the modern media machine has to do to keep itself occupied in June. But listen, I mean, Bryce is doing what Bryce was always expected to do, which is take a bunch of snaps and get ready to play in that opener.
All right, Darin, again, I'm glad you quashed that as thoroughly and as forcefully as you did. We are asking the old guy here. Let me ask you about Jaycee Horn. Level of concern for another foot injury from someone who is as important to their defense as almost anybody.
I'd say at this point, I would say low medium. I mean, JC's not going to be practicing for the next week and a half, but every indication, and Dr. Robert Anderson, one of the foremost foot and ankle specialists in this fine country, was here Monday and checked him out. And basically, JC should be fine for the start of camp. I mean, he was working out on his own last weekend, rolled his ankle, foot had a little bit of swelling or whatever in it, I don't know. But, Bob comes in, checks out the foot and the ankle, says put him in a boot for a little bit, and he won't practice until we get to Spartanburg. So as long as that remains the case and he gets back out there, it's also worth pointing out it was the other foot. It wasn't the same one from his rookie year. So, this might be just a little thing where he rolls his ankle and, keeps on moving. But we'll see once we get to training camp. In terms of importance, that's, you can't put a scale on that. There are a few players not named, I don't know, maybe Brian Burns, who are more important to this defense than JC, because when you look around the case, and this is true with both those guys, when you look at the rest of the depth chart, at their position, there ain't a lot. I mean, without JC out there today, you're looking at a group of corners, which includes C.J. Henderson and Keith Taylor and, some lesser-known stars like Stanley Thomas Oliver and Herb Miller and the like. So, I mean, it's obviously a position of concern if he's not going to be able. But, everything I understand about JC's condition, and even from seeing him in the training room the other day, I wasn't getting treatment. Don't worry, I'm okay. I know that was your foremost concern. But he was fine. I mean, he looks at me and he says, yeah, I'm good. short-term thing.
So I said this earlier. Darin Gantt, I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm glad you're okay, even though you're hanging around the training room.
Thank you.
For an elite defense, if the Panthers want to have an elite defense, I don't know that there is an elite defense in the NFL that doesn't have an elite shutdown cornerback. And that's what Jaycee Horn is supposed to be. That was my level of concern. He missed almost entirely, year one. He is in year 3, and this is about the time where he is establishing himself as that don't throw it to this side of the field type of level.
Oh, no doubt. He's that guy. He is him, as the kids say sometimes. I believe they also say he has a dog inside of him or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, no, Jaycee Horn, really good at football when he's out there on the field. And, again, last year when he had the broken wrist coming down the stretch after that Lions game, did they miss him against Tampa Bay? They did. Is that the reason they didn't go to the playoffs? Maybe. I don't know that this is necessarily going to be an elite defense with or without him. I just don't know. They're putting in a whole new thing, and they're still putting together a lot of pieces that don't necessarily fit. I mean, they're really thin at linebacker. Once you get past Shaq Thompson, I mean, Frankie Luvu is going to start inside next to him in the base package. Frankie's not necessarily a natural inside linebacker in a 3-4. You've got a guy in Jeremy Chin who is probably going to play a lot of nickel this year and do some stuff up near the line of scrimmage, almost like a linebacker role he was in his rookie year. And that's not necessarily normal. I mean, they're going to have to tweak this thing and modify this defense and specialize it a little bit, kind of customize some roles because they don't have traditional 3-4 defense parts. I mean, you see what they did in free agency. They had to go out and sign 3-4 defensive linemen just to go out and line up because they didn't have any.
Right.
So I think it's going to take time, probably more time than they can spend this offseason to get that thing fixed to the point where it's 3-4 personnel like you'd want it to look. But, again, obviously, to your point, JC's a huge part of that because no matter what the front looks like, he is the kind of guy who can make half a field go away. He is the kind of guy that people just don't bother throwing at. And now – part of that is you go through stretches last year where all they had opposite him was C.J. Henderson, who was not as bad as I think some people think he is. He's very talented. He's just inconsistent. And Keith Taylor knows guys. But, JC should be back for the start of training camp. Oh, by the way, Dante Jackson, who's okay at this too, is on track. I was talking to Dante the other day, and he said, Spartanburg, he should be good to go, which is good news for those guys because if you're building a defense around those two corners, that's a pretty good place to start. Now you just got to keep them on the field.
And no question about it. Final thing for Darin Gantt, ask the old guy, Panthers.com. And maybe this is in relation to the last guy who had this position, but there is something about listening to Frank Reich that reminds us that solid and somebody who's been there and gets it really does matter at the head coaching position. He just sounds like a guy to me that, that he's not going to be surprised by anything.
Right, and not to compare him to anybody else, who used to be here, or John Fox or Ron Rivera or George Seifert or anybody. I mean, but when you look at the entirety of this staff, Frank kind of represents the off-season theme. They wanted adults in that room.
Yep.
And when you fill it up with Frank and Jim Caldwell and Dom Capers and the like, you've got experience. There's over 200 years of NFL coaching experience on this staff and another 75 plus years of playing experience in the league among those guys. So when you look at whether it's Josh McCown or Sean Jefferson or Thomas Brown or Deuce Staley, I mean, they've got guys who have done it and know it and know the material, and I've said over and over, probably said it to you, to me, the biggest difference in this staff and any staff they've ever put together around here is the fact that Jim Caldwell, not a good coach, a great coach, Jim Caldwell's walking around in this sort of nebulous senior advisor role where nobody really knows what he does from day to day. That's like dropping a competency bomb on this place. I mean, Jim Caldwell is an incredible NFL head coach. I mean, my God, he won in Detroit. Nobody wins in Detroit since Buddy Parker, for God's sake. So, it's a serious staff made up of serious people. And Frank does. I mean, he just kind of exudes that, hey, we're working through this thing. I mean, today when everybody got kind of lathered up on the talk about the depth chart in June, Frank was like, hey, this is where we want to be. We knew Bryce was going to get sprinkled in here. We're doing everything we can to get Bryce ready, but we don't have to make a decision today or announce the depth chart, so we're not going to.
Amazing stuff. Darin Gantt, at Darin Gantt on Twitter, 2 T's for extra talent. My friend, Ask the Old Guy at Panthers.com. It's not an Ask the Old Guy, it's just Darin's byline is on a story, so you should read it. I appreciate your time.
There will be more. We'll have more from Bryce Young's day on the practice field and at the lectern post-practice at Panthers.com, and the latest installment in our behind-the-scenes, inside the training room, Austin Corbett rehab diary.
Very
Things
nice.
You can only read at Panthers.com, Adam.
That's why you're hanging out in the trainer's room.
There you go. We're trying to take you places other people cannot.
All right. Thank you so much, man. I'll talk to you later.
You got it. Yeah.
Darin Gantt.